Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jarrell Mason, aka Jay Mason. Welcome to a very, very, very special episode of Beyond the Album Cover, where we get inside the entertainment industry with those in the know and give them their flowers right here to be celebrated. With me on the show today is the man responsible for what you see and hear with Beyond the Album Cover. It all started with a dream one to get on the radio back in 2004 on the campus of UNC Greensboro at WAG 103.1 FM. Going to the informational booth, I asked, "Hey, how do I get a show?" And he told me the steps I needed to take, and it was off and running to the races. So, all the interviews that you've seen, whether it be from the time machine and in this platform, wouldn't be possible without this man saying yes to me, letting me play commercial music, even though WAG was non-commercial. But he had to take a chance on me, and I'm glad that he did. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big thank you, a round of applause for Mr. Jack Bonney. Jack, thank you for coming on Beyond the Album Cover, and how are you?
I'm good, James. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been watching your progress over the years, and it's wild to think it goes back 21 years when we first met. Very hard to believe that, but yeah, I'm honored to be here, and I love what you've been doing, and you've had the work ethic since the get go, and I'm not surprised where you're at with doing this and continuing to do it because I know you got the passion for it.
Yeah, man, it's definitely an honor to have you on. And once again, just to tell you thank you for, giving me my start. And like you said, hard to believe it's been 21 years, fall of 2004, walking along College Avenue to pedestrian strip on UNCG's campus. If you know, you know. First week of campus, they have the informational booth where all the different organizations have booths where you want to sign up and join. And, I found WAG and said, hey, let me join. And you let me join. And it was training and everything and so on. So we're gonna get into the meat of all that later on, but let's go to the beginning. Where were you born? Where you're from? And how did your passion in music start?
Okay. So I was born in Baltimore. Um, and Honestly, the love of music, I would say probably didn't really start till about middle school. And one of my first acts that I really got into was actually the Jackson Five. I have a vivid memory of being 4 years old, 4 to 5 years old. One of my earliest memories ever of seeing the Thriller music video, and it was a very impactful video for everyone to see for that first time. But I remember just being like, "Wow!" And I kind of like this music as well. Michael Jackson was a huge deal, and so I kind of got into his music and Jackson Five at a very young age, but then didn't really come back to it till about middle school, and then shifted gears dramatically and kind of got into like punk rock and started hanging out with a lot of kids that were into that music and that scene in Baltimore. Actually, by the time I got into high school, kind of really developed a good friendship with this kind of core group of guys that were kind of outcast, and went to an all boys high school. Actually, kind of a preppy, buttoned up all boys high school that we were definitely the outsiders. We would wear like thrift store clothing, and just stand out a lot. And anyway, one of the guys that was in our group, this guy named Ben Vallis, he actually had his mom started letting him do shows in his basement. So he started having bands playing in his basement that would come all around from the East Coast, and they would stop in his basement and play there. And then eventually, actually, in his junior year in high school, he actually opened up a venue called the Small Intestine on Bel Air Road in Baltimore, going towards the city. And he was hosting concerts and touring bands in junior year of high school, into senior year, and that was just very influential to me. Kind of exposed me to a lot of music that, yeah, was not on the radio, not on mainstream radio. I mean, I should backtrack a little bit. I kind of grew up with like alternative radio in the 90s, 1994 in particular. I remember being a big year for like alternative bands that are now considered kind of big bands, like, a Weezer band or Pavement or Smashing Pumpkins, stuff like that. Yeah. So there was that scene was happening kind of on the mainstream level, but then there was definitely an underground scene that was happening, always has been happening in like kind of the punk rock scene, a DIY ethic of like just kind of doing it yourself, putting on shows, whether it be in your basement or a venue you can rent. And that led into basically going to college. And I knew going into college, I was reading about college radio and how college radio was kind of the last beacon of being able to play this kind of music on the radio. You didn't have any kind of obligations to any labels, any commercial interests. You could play whatever you wanted, and it was a place where a lot of bands broke out. From big examples like REM to several smaller examples in the kind of indie rock scene. And so when I knew looking at colleges that I was going to go to a college that had a radio station. So when I was looking at colleges in North Carolina, I didn't like the colleges that I had in Maryland to choose from. There's not a lot actually. There's a lot of private schools, not a lot of public universities. And I was going to North Carolina with my family in the summertime to the beach, and I really liked North Carolina a lot. So my junior year, we started looking at colleges in North Carolina, and we were told by family friends that we're actually Chapel Hill alumni. I really wanted to go to Chapel Hill, but I couldn't. I didn't have the grades to make it in Chapel Hill, being out of state. So they recommended this school, UNC Greensboro, and I actually had the plan of maybe going to UNC Greensboro and then transferring to Chapel Hill. But then, I found out they had a radio station, and right when I got there, just like you, my freshman year, I actually didn't even get a show my freshman year. I was a sub DJ because I didn't like sign up right away. I kind of waited like about a month and then signed up and became a sub and just fell in love with it and developed some of my best friendships that I still have to this day of people that were DJing there. And so I started off just as a sub DJ. Then eventually, my second semester freshman year, got a show, and ever since then had a show. And then I knew I wanted to get on the executive board. And my senior year, became the music director. And my senior year, we had a really strong student executive board that was trying to be pretty active, putting on shows, putting on events across campus and Greensboro, the city itself. And we kind of you're talking about me being kind of the opportunity for me was you probably remember him, Dr. John Lee Jellicourse.
Mhm.
um, he really saw WAG as an opportunity for the university to capitalize on and be good exposure for the Department of Media Studies as well, and that the station really could be something special. Basically, the big issue every year was the continuity aspect of the student executive board. One year would be strong, and then the next year wouldn't be very strong. And so they wanted to have more continuity. And we basically kind of wrote up a general manager description and submitted it to the higher ups at the university. And at first, they were into the idea, but said there was no money, no budget for it. And then eventually they kind of scrambled around and got some money to hire a general manager. And so I had graduated in May of 2002. And by March 2003, I had the job because they were doing interviews. They basically found the money by the fall of 2002 and then doing interviews January 2003. And my first day, I still remember on the job, was 03/03/03, March 3rd, 2003. And I became the GM, and I was the general manager there from 2003 to 2011. And yeah, all along, I guess, kind of coming back to the question of what music, music being the main passion behind me wanting to do that. And music still part of my career, that I'm sure we're going to talk about, managing a record store. And so music has never gone away, ever since I guess I was in high school.
Yeah, so music has been the main constant. I never knew your story of how you got to the GM gig at UAG, and I think that's one of the things that stood out about what we did was that unlike the other college stations in and around the triad, WAG really let the students and the community, because some people in the community would be able to DJ on the station as well, primarily in the summer months when the students were away for the summer. But you really got to showcase what you loved because you had, although your free form formats, you had your album rotations that would get played at certain times, but it would be truly like your music playlist was on shuffle where you could hear alternative 1 hour, you'll hear hip hop the next hour, you'll hear Americana the next, you'll hear blues the next, and you maybe hear some sports talk for the next hour. So it was a mix of everything.
Yeah, that was one thing. When I came in, I would say it was kind of a little cliquish, and it was definitely more of like a punk rock, indie rock primarily. That's what you hear primarily, with a few specialty shows here and there. And I wanted to mix it up. I was like, we definitely need to hear more hip hop. We definitely need to hear more electronic music. We should be hearing, yeah, more Americana folk, jazz. And so that was my goal as music director. That's one thing I
Mm.
did as music director, and I wanted to continue that ever since. After I started the GM job, I want to make sure that was a thing. And yeah, I thought that was always a great advantage of turning on WAG. You never knew what you were going to hear, and sometimes you liked it, sometimes you didn't, but it was always at least something different.
Right, and then another one of the bands that I believe also got huge airplay on WUAG, and correct me if I'm wrong. This member of this group was an alumnus of UNCG. I'm talking about Rihanna Giddens from the Carolina Chocolate Drops, I believe.
Correct. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yep. A graduate of UNCG. Or yeah, definitely a Greensboro native. I think she went to UNCG. Anyway. Yeah. Yes, that's a great example of. I mean, that was another thing too, that college radio was always important for, was giving local bands a chance to have their music played on the air, because they had no shot to get on mainstream commercial radio locally. Their one chance really was to get on college radio, and Carolina Chocolate Drops definitely a great example, along with a myriad of others. Yeah.
Right. And I want to go back to, you mentioned college radio and how you mentioned REM and other acts really got their start on college radio prior to mainstream radio, and the mainstream musical masses got a hold of them. What was it that you think college radio made it so special to where acts like that could get a break before really hitting the big time?
Yeah, I mean, it even starts off as, like, if you take an example like an REM, they kind of were a local band out of Athens, Georgia. And basically, the buzz kind of starts locally, and then it kind of goes nationally, through kind of this underground circuit of college stations. I think a big factor that, unfortunately, is a magazine that doesn't exist anymore, was CMJ magazine,
Mhm.
College Music Journal. They basically were the billboard of college radio. They would print the top 200 albums played each week, and that was a way to be like, oh wow, who's this band? And then you would watch these bands kind of come up. And I just think that old school word of mouth definitely was a factor, because obviously it's pre-internet age. And then these bands just really hitting the streets and touring. REM played a lot actually right there on Tate Street, a place called the Hong Kong House, and other venues in Greensboro. And Greensboro kind of always was and this is something we took advantage of when I was GM too, is the location of Greensboro being on 40 and 85. Very convenient for bands to tour and make a stop in Greensboro. They play Charlotte, and then they go to Greensboro, and then they probably go to Richmond, and then DC, and up north, and then from Charlotte to Atlanta. So that was something that was like prime for Greensboro to have a scene always. The bands, it was easy for bands to come through there, and they did. And I think also UNCG being a liberal arts university, it wasn't like a big, athletics wasn't a big deal. It was more, fine arts. There's a, great art program there, dance, school of music. The school of music there is great. So I think, the fact that you had that liberal arts mentality, and it wasn't like a big fraternity or sorority school, I think also helped kind of have more of a, outsider, arty crowd, that could really be themselves, I guess. And yeah, so I think everything from word of mouth to bands touring to just hitting the pavement and getting their music out there. Zines were a big thing. These handmade DIY magazines. Again, come back to that DIY aspect. People would make these magazines, not making any money on them, just because they wanted to write about bands they liked, or house shows they went to, or CD reviews. That was a big deal too. So a big influence on these bands making it big.
Right, and it kind of felt like how, back in the old days with wrestling, how you had your regional territories and bands or wrestlers would be big in your territory before going to your national promotion. So almost kind of like that same thing you mentioned, Greensboro being the midpoint between different stops along the East Coast. It'll be easier for artists to make a Greensboro stop before going to the next big city gig, and how, you know, the triad. I didn't really know too much about the musical history of the triad until moving up here, and how rich the music scene was and still is around the triad, but also one of the venues, not in the triad, but in and around the triangle. That's Chapel Hill, Raleigh, Durham, Cat's Cradle out of Carborough. So just talk about the importance of Cat's Cradle and how that served as a major venue for artists.
For sure. So I actually backtrack a little bit, going back why not only did I like North Carolina as in general, growing up and going coming on summer vacations to the beach. I the story is pretty funny, but my sister had a 17 magazine, and in the magazine they had this article about fashion related to music scenes. And so there was like a girl that was wearing, again, this was mid 90s, girl wearing like flannel for grunge in Seattle. A girl had like mohawk for punk rock in New York. And then there was the indie rock girl that was in Chapel Hill. And I was like, what's going on in Chapel Hill? I did not know there was a scene until actually seeing that article. And I said, okay, I guess something's going on in Chapel Hill. That's not too far from where we go to the beach. I mean, I like Chapel Hill. I've always been a Tar Heel fan in general, so I liked watching the Tar Heels play basketball in general. And I just kind of always knew that it was a school that I was kind of interested in. But then when I saw that, I was like, whoa, I want to go to Chapel Hill. So that summer when I was 17, went to Chapel Hill, and there was actually like several record stores there. School Kids Records was a big deal there, right there on Franklin Street. And there was just like this really definitely like kind of punk rock scene going on there. That was punk indie scene that was going on that was quite interesting. And then yeah, to find out, that Cat's Cradle had a lot to do with that. Merge Records, a big label that now is based out of Durham. That's been going on for, they've existed for over 35 years. Very successful, great example of an indie label that was very DIY. Basically, started off with a band called Superchunk, who still exists to this day. They wanted to get their music out, and they knew they didn't want to mess with the major labels, or were never going to even crack with the major labels. So they just did it themselves, started putting out their own cassettes, CDs, 7 inches, and then they started signing their friends. And then next thing they know, they're signing big acts up until like Arcade Fire is probably the biggest example of the most major act they've ever signed. But they've signed a lot of other acts too over the years and released a lot of great music. And so that's a big importance to a scene too. Is like if there's a record label around that's getting this music out, that's a big deal. And Cat's Cradle, yeah, I'll never forget the first time I went. I was actually just talking to a friend last night about this first band I ever act I ever saw. It was Elliott Smith, and it was in. I was like pulled up to Cat's Cradle. I was reading all about it, and it's like, man, I'm really happy to see this in this shopping center. And I said, wait a minute, what? This doesn't look anything special. And now, almost 26 years later, I'm still going to shows at the Cat's Cradle, and it's still in the same space, and it still has a lot of memories for me, and it still is a great beacon for new music that's breaking out. Like, I mean, I'll go to the Cat's Cradle website and see these bands. I'm like, who is that? And even managing a record store, I'm like, I don't know who that is. I gotta look who that is. So Cat's Cradle, being a smaller music venue, was always willing to take chances on other bands. You had a lot of other venues in Chapel Hill too, Local 506, which is still there, Go Rehearsal Studios, which is no longer there. That was actually in an old car wash. So again, showing you that people just any space they got to do music and they were going to try it. And there's always shows. So yeah, I drove to Chapel Hill a lot in Greensboro, like on weekday nights, a lot. It was 45-minute to an hour drive, and it was worth it every time.
Yeah, that's one venue I never got to experience actually. I never got to experience Cat Cradle, but when reading those announcements and seeing who would come through, they had a lot of good acts, come through the doors at Cat's Cradle.
For sure. And yeah, I would be remiss to not mention the fact that Durham and Raleigh, again, that triangle, the fact that all of them are within 30 to 40 minutes of one another. Sometimes you'd have bands, that would play, two locations because they could just kind of stay in there and play, Raleigh and Durham or Durham Chapel Hill. And Raleigh had a lot of good venues, and then Durham, I think, now has good venues. They were more like definitely kind of DIY, but I mean, you could also give the example of like Duke has a really good radio station. Raleigh, NC State's got a really good radio station, so is Chapel Hill. So the college radio scene in the Triangle is very, very strong. To this day, it still is. And that, again, major influence on the fact that there was bands coming to the Triangle because it was, again, kind of a nest already there of these college radio stations and the DJs that were on the air and their friends and that community.
Right, and then I think one of the other things that UAG was innovative for was that we had live streaming up and going when it was still in its infancy and not too many people were really embracing the internet. And because when you think about it, WAG, the wattage was very, very small. You could
Yeah.
only be heard around the campus and you couldn't really pump out like the other stations. So I can remember calling up back when UAG not UAG, UNCG used to have individual phone numbers for the dorm rooms and would do like a voicemail blast promoting the show and then just plug in the live stream whenever I got because I knew that I wasn't going to be heard outside of UNCG's radius without saying, hey, be sure to go to
Right.
live stream to listen. We were able to pull listeners in and around the state and also internationally as well.
And the stream that's very important. You mentioned the streaming because I don't know if you're aware, but WXYC Chapel Hills radio station is the very first station in the country that went online. And I think that had a lot to do with the fact that they were on a college campus, and so you had very smart students that had the brains to go ahead and be on the computers and figure out how to get the streaming to work, and they did. And it's actually, if you, I don't know if it's still on their website, but it used to be on XYC's website. There was a question on Jeopardy, and it said, what station, what city, what town is WXYC located, is known for the first internet stream station? And the answer is Chapel Hill. So pretty wild. And yeah, very, very, very important that streaming existed early on for college radio. And then, yeah, obviously the commercial stations were like, whoa, what's going on here? We should be doing that too. So, yeah.
Right. Then I also think nationally, WRAL out of Raleigh, Durham was the first TV station nationally to do a news broadcast out in HD, I believe.
Okay.
This is
Yeah.
like
Yeah. So, I mean,
early 2000s, I think.
yeah, you're dealing with like there's a lot in the triangle in particular. There's, again, it's not called the Research Triangle Park for no reason. There's a lot of smart people out here, engineers and tech types that know what they're doing and take chances on things and innovate technology. And that's a great example. Yeah.
So fast forward, follow oh 04 hits. Like I mentioned, I go up to the information booth to find out more about the station and how to get on. What was your first impressions, when I came up to the booth inquiring about, wanting to get a show, especially knowing how WAG was really trying to open up the floodgates to expand the musical palette to go beyond indie rock, what have you, and, really broaden the musical horizons of the listeners.
Well, I can't say exactly what I was feeling, but I can tell you that I was probably pretty excited to meet someone that was, as I could tell, into it as you were. Because yeah, that was the goal of mine. Is I wanted to have DJs 24/7, live DJs 24/7. That's another thing too. Obviously, you're not going to find on commercial radio live DJs 24/7. Now we did accomplish that a few semesters, and that was something I was very proud of. So as many people we could get on the air that were wanted to be on the air, the better. And I would say, from my recall, you coming up, showing that you were very excited to get started. I think it was like a no brainer to sign you on. And did you take the class to begin with, the credit class, or no? You just were
I
straight
think
student
I
volunteer.
think I just signed up for the station, ended up taking the credit course later on.
Okay, okay. So that was another avenue that would get students involved. It was, you could get credit, academic credit for being on the radio, and that was a good avenue to get people that maybe were very interested in radio as a possible career, and or just broadcasting in general. So I think it was more exciting, and so those were kind of like guaranteed DJs when we had the credit class. So the more students you had signed up for that, the better. I think the max we could have in there was like 25 students. So if we had that, we always knew, oh, we got at least 25 DJs most likely. Although some didn't DJ, they just would help out at events and stuff like that to make their credit or do sports reports, news reports, promotional stuff. But yeah, I think probably it was more exciting to have someone just kind of random come up to the table and saying they want to get involved. And then when you did, yeah, you again, probably at the beginning when the music you were playing, we were like, oh, okay, this is a little different. I mean, I had never heard of the genre New Jack Swing until meeting you. And I'd grown up with that music, known that music. And I said, wow, how is this kid interested in this music that was probably before. I don't know if you were born when some of this music was out. You probably were, but you were
Yeah,
very
yeah, but
young.
like really little, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I always thought that was very fascinating. And then, um, yeah, not to probably we'll get into this, but yeah, I mean, it was very cool to have you and Chris Lee. And basically, Friday nights always was kind of like a night for hip hop specialty shows or R&B specialty shows, and that was your show, correct? Well, initially, probably you probably had a very late. What was your first show?
Initially, I was on the 2 to 4 a.m. slot, and I
Okay,
was co-hosting my show with a guy named Miles. And
okay,
then what ended up happening was, I guess Miles ended up coming back the following semester. So I ended up running the board myself because he ran the board, first semester while I wrote shotgun in the second chair.
okay. And then when did you eventually get the Friday night slot?
I eventually got the Friday night slot, probably the following year. I got Friday nights 9 to 11 and then 7 to 9 because after that I used to come on after Section A in A Town and then it inverse where I was coming on before them.
Okay. So your first show was what, like 11 to 1 or Friday
Yeah,
night show or something like that,
yeah, it
or
was like 2 to 4, then,
and
9 to 11. Well, no, 11 to 1, then 7 to 9. So, bounced
okay.
around all over the place, but I could
Yeah.
definitely remember that first semester being, graveyard shift, 2 to 4 on Saturdays. And
That, yeah, I mean, that was always, it's kind of like freshman orientation there, freshman initiation, I guess. Sorry. Better word to use is that, yeah, if you were a freshman, most likely you were going to have a work your way up to getting a more of a prime time slot. And I'm glad you got there quicker than later. Yeah.
yeah, because this was back when the radio station used to be in the basement of Taylor, right? Or was it
Yes.
Brown?
Yep.
It
Basement
was
of Taylor
Taylor, and
Building.
then we moved over to Brown to the third floor
Yes.
where it felt like TRL, minus the sign saying you want to come up. But I
Right.
remember when it was drama season, we used to actually have to close the doors to the studio so that way everything that was coming from the stage and from the people backstage from the shows wouldn't interfere with the broadcast. But it would be really spooky going there at 1, 2 in the morning. You're solo there, and you're worried about, oh, how long do I have to go use the restroom before getting back before this CD runs out? Back when we had the den and CD cards.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, looking back, it probably was not the safest thing to have people there that late, but it was, your college students, a lot of college students stay up late. And again, when you see that from a freshman that they're willing to go through the grind of doing a show that late, you know that they're really into it. Because there's plenty of people who got burned out. There's plenty of DJs that would do it and be all enthusiastic in the beginning and then realize, oh, wait a minute, I can't handle this anymore and drop out. And because that's again the key thing is this is all volunteer. No one's getting paid except if you were on the student board, you got a small stipend. But for the most part, yeah, you weren't making any money, and so it was just passion. And you definitely had that. And I remember we'd often as executive board be like, man, Jay Mace, man, that guy, he's so into his show and putting a lot of effort into a show. And you did over the years. I mean, just like again, you do now. You reached out to all these artists to try to interview them, and that was not something that the common DJ did at even college radio in general, I can say.
Yeah, yeah. And like you mentioned, this was right when internet was early on, and a lot of it will be hitting up directly their MySpace page or any
Right.
other website they would have, and it will be ran by them directly or their management team saying, "Hey, I have this show. Would you mind doing an interview?" And most of the time, they would say yes and agree to. Because I remember having to ask whoever was in charge of the production room, like, "Hey, let me in because I got interview for XYZ scheduled at blah 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 time." And thankfully, they will be able to unlock the door for me and let me be able to use the phone and plug the interviews in, and I would be able to air them later. I think I kind of knew that the show was something special was when I was able to get Danny Wood from New Kids on the Block. And this was prior to them announcing that they were getting back together to reform and they put out the album The Block in '08. And the interview that I did with him was done maybe a couple of months or a year prior to them reforming.
Yeah, I remember that one was exciting personally for me because growing up, my sister was a huge NKOTB fan. So I, kind of begrudgingly liked them too because she was always playing them, and so it was very cool when you got Danny Wood. And again, I think again you just had the maturity and uh, the follow up. Like you didn't you didn't just say like oh, I'm going to try to get this interview. You really like put in the time and effort to really, you were well organized, and that was very key to your show being a success.
Yeah, and then there was another interview that I was super excited for. I got a chance to interview Donnie Simpson. So Donnie Simpson, as I'm sure you're familiar with, BET at the time being based in DC, when they had the studios in DC, had Video Soul, and he was on the air at a DC station at the time, no longer there. But I was able to secure that after he did his morning show at the station. So I said to myself, I'm skipping English 101 to interview Donnie Simpson. I mean, it's not every day you get to interview, the legend, Mr. Green Eyes himself, and now he's in the Radio Hall of Fame. So, that was one of the cool ones I was able to do over the years that, I was really excited about. But switching gears, talk about Chris Lee and his journey at UAG and just seeing where he is now, where he's the lead sports anchor at WRL.
Yeah, for sure, sure. Chris is definitely another tremendous success story of the alumni at WAG during that period. I mean, I look back at it, it was a very magical time when I was there. From in particular, I say from the GM years of '03 to '11. When I look at see what some of the alumni is doing, it's amazing. And Chris, yeah, Chris came on around the same time as you, and also, wanted to play music that necessarily we generally didn't play, but he had the passion for it and had a great radio voice, and uh, also was made it clear that he was willing to put in the effort to try to get artists on there and interviews, and it wasn't just going to be your average college radio, rap show. It was gonna be something different, and you having the two of you guys back to back, and then having you guys obviously kind of become friends. um, I think it just made for again Friday nights was like a fun atmosphere. Obviously sometimes Ev and Section 8 were breaking rules, and we their shows sometimes a little on the edge, but it was still fun to listen to. And again, it was just a good vibe for those hours. And Chris, yeah, Chris, you could tell early on, pretty multi-talented guy. That if you would have told me back then, oh, he's gonna do things and he's gonna be on television, I would probably say I could definitely see that. And so I never forget when I turned on WRL and saw him there. I said, "Whoa, whoa, that that was I always say he was technically a student of mine, but you guys all seem more like colleagues than students in a lot of ways because we all again we're doing it out of the passion of being on the radio. And
Mhm.
Chris was great at what he did, and this is I'm very happy for her to see his success.
Yeah, I jokingly still refer to him as the artist formerly known as Show Smooth
Yep, show smooth. Yeah,
whenever I was him. But it's definitely cool to see, his journey where he's at now in WRAL, where he's doing sports, and also another person who got her started at WAG, but is blowing up with social media and everything is Jessamine Stanley. And
yes,
talk about her and her rise or her journey, seeing where she is at now with her social media following and presence.
yeah, for sure. Another huge success story from that alumni era. She was a little later on than you guys. I don't know the exact years off the top of my head, but she started off as a DJ, I believe, but then quickly showed interest in getting involved in the news department and wanted to do news stories a little more in depth than your average student, taking on stories that maybe someone else wouldn't take on, and she would. And then she applied to be news director, and it was kind of a no brainer to give her the news director job because she had the skills and had shown the effort into it. And then she she actually didn't continue as news director, and I believe left school for a little bit. Went to the School for the Arts in Winston Salem to kind of pursue because she was always kind of had an art background and theatrical background and want to get involved in performing arts. And she did that, and then again, it's kind of the next thing I see is like she's huge on Instagram, and I don't even know how many followers she has, but it's a lot of followers. And doing this kind of really cool, yeah, she became famous for yoga, and kind of no body shame yoga, which is awesome. And again, if you would have told me that, I would believe it, because she has the personality and has the work ethic to do it.
Yeah, and what makes it think that it was special at UAG to where you were able to get the right people to get fit into the right places on the station, like how you mentioned, everybody's off doing well and being successful in their respective endeavors.
Yeah, it's just back to kind of being this magical time where I think a lot of creative types found the station, whether it was through word of mouth or a friend of theirs was on the station, or again, yeah, they came to. I mean, a big thing we did that was kind of our calling card was WAG present shows. We did about one of those, one a month there for a stretch of about 5 years, and that exposed the station to not only again people, students on campus, but people in Greensboro, in the city in general. Because the shows actually started off on campus. We would do them at the faculty center, and we kind of outgrew the faculty center, became too small, and we had to basically kind of find venues throughout the city. And that was always a struggle because there was unfortunately a lot of venues that would come and go and not hang around. But we would always find somewhere. And I think again, people would come out again, whether they were students or just people from the community, they'd come out and be like, "Whoa, what's going on at WAG? This is pretty cool. I like what they're doing." And it just attracted people that way. I think, the more we were out there, the more we were going to attract creative types, I believe. And again, in fact, UNCG kind of is a place that a lot of creative types go to, students go to. It just kind of made it kind of quite easy, for people to find us, and the talent was there.
It was definitely a great promo tool for the station, great community outreach to get our name and the buzz out there for what we were cooking up at 1031. Now, how did Ev and Section 8 come on your radar? Because I like the vibe that they had in their hip hop mix show because it gave me the similar feel of what we saw Stretch and Bobito have with their radio show when they were doing it up at Columbia University, where a lot of future names of hip hop got their start on their show before getting signed to a label.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Ev kind of the same deal. It was Ev before meeting Section 8, in that I'm pretty sure he kind of even came to my office and said like, "Hey, I want to do a hip hop show," and he kind of showed that passion early on, and I think we were in the need of a hip hop show then, and it's kind of the right place, right time type thing. And then he just kind of became a staple at the station. Like he was always always every year, every semester, I was gonna have a show, and then Section 8 kind of joined him, and that was really cool because he had, yeah, definitely, like, he came from New York, and had that New York City attitude and connections because he was like friends with Redman and that whole crew, and the two of them, yeah, I mean, it was also cool. Again, they put in the effort to where they would be getting records, literally records, to play on the air from labels that we weren't necessarily getting. Because again, a lot of college radio was kind of still stuck in that indie rock bubble, where that was primarily what we would get. Because yeah, I mean, the music would be sent to us for free, with the hope of being played on the air. But to get like rap, obviously with rap, you got the issue of making sure it's clean enough to play on the air. So you'd have to get these radio edits sent to you, and it was more work for sure to try to get radio edits on the air, and to do a rap show on college radio than it was to do just kind of your basic rotation show. So Ed put in the work, and then Section 8 and him had very good chemistry on the air. Again, sometimes saying things they should have been saying. The good news, again, it was on late night. I know Safe Harbor exists, but we didn't really push. We didn't want to take the chances of like anyone abusing Safe Harbor hours, so we never really made that a thing. Like, oh, you can get away with it, but we didn't, because it was too risky. That would
Mhm.
be something if to get knocked off the air just because someone hears something they don't like. So anyway, yeah, they were sometimes stressful, to have on the air, but I always knew it was going to be at least a good time. And yeah, the listenership was always pretty good, during Friday nights.
Yeah, I definitely, enjoyed the show. Like I said, I had the chance to go on after and prior to, and there were a few times where we kind of did a crossover where they would mix on my show for 2 hours and great feel, great vibe. And you mentioned, hip hop, and I think college radio also played a big hand in breaking, certain rap acts as well. Because I believe when Wu-Tang was first coming in, Protect Your Net really got heavy airplay on college radio before they really blew up mainstream. And also Little Brother, because I can remember coming to UAG not knowing who Little Brother was, but once I saw the copy of the listening at the station, I was like, what is this? I got to hear more of it. And then to see, be able to meet Pooh and Fonte when, not Fonte, Ninth Wonder,
Mhm.
because they did a promo run at UAG when they were pushing the Minstrel Show when it came out of '05. And, to see Little Brother, when they became successful and see Ninth Wonder, where he is in the thing like, man, UAG and college radio in general really helped fuel, Little Brother to where they are. And then if it wasn't for Little Brother, we wouldn't have, Rhapsody, no J. Cole, and then the other rap acts that came out of NC to follow after him. Also, the baby, who I believe went to UNCG for a good minute, from what I've heard.
Who went there?
The baby, rapper the
Oh, okay.
baby, out of
Yeah, I've
out
heard
of
that too.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I've heard that too. So yeah, for sure. And Little Brother being kind of that example of like a local act, but at that time they had already reached kind of national status, underground national status, and super cool that they came to the station. And it's kind of full circle because although he didn't come to the station, Fonte shops at the record store. So I actually saw Fonte last week. So very cool that they didn't forget their roots, and also knew the importance of college radio because they all met in college. They met at NC Central, and the rest is history. So it's just I think it comes down to a lot of people, a lot of examples of just young people that had nothing to lose and had the passion for music and were going to put in the work, and that was a big factor.
Right. And then also another part of hip hop history that the triad, I think if you know, you know, but not a lot of people don't. But, Payroll Records and just how instrumental Payroll was, to hip hop. You had Dana Luchin, you had Mark Sparks, Entice out of that crew, Ski Beats
Okay,
came
yeah,
out of
yeah,
Payroll, and
yeah.
and the thing, all that, came from Greensboro. And when you see and hear those names on a lot of records that would later become big hits nationally, you're like, oh, this sprouted off from this.
Yeah, 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 and all yeah, kind of start off underground. It's pretty. Like you said, the scene's always been there, and it's all kinds of music. And that's what's awesome about the scenes here in the Triad and the Triangle.
Right. And then I think another cool thing as well is that shifting to the commercial side, 102 Jams, WJMH for those that don't know. I think they do a great job of being able to find the right people in the right places, because everybody that has ever worked at 102 has gone on to do well for themselves. We mentioned Chris Lee earlier. You had B Dot, Morgan McKenzie, Buster Brown, Africa, Wally Coyote, and we could Terrence J. We could go on and all the people that came from 102 to go on to be very successful. And I believe they're still live and local where they have DJs 24/7. I'm not sure. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But what is it about 102 that makes it such a good breeding ground for personalities to get their foot in the door and to really launch pad themselves into a bigger stratosphere?
Yeah, great example of a commercial station that was a major deal. I mean, 102 Jams is one of the biggest. I don't like the term urban that they use there, but rap stations, R&B stations in the southeast. And I didn't know that when I came to Greensboro, and I would all of a sudden see these stickers everywhere, these yellow and black stickers, 102 Jams. and everyone's talking about 1 or 2 jams, 1 or 2 jams, and then I found, started listening to it, and I was like, wow, this is a fun station. They're very active, um, and again, the more active you are as a radio station, the more, especially back then, um, the more you were going to get listenership, and the more listenership you have, the bigger you can be. And they're a great example of a station that just had talent, and kind of found talent, came to them, and they found talent, and um, they did a lot of big things for the community. And again, just generally the Southeast. You talk to anybody that's from North Carolina, you can mention 1 or 2 jams. For the most part, they're going to know what you're talking about. But they were even well known, down in Atlanta and DC, up in DC, and great station. That, yeah, I don't listen to them anymore. I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised they're still doing probably a lot of live DJs around the clock. So it's awesome.
Yeah, because I remember, the summer concert was a big deal. A lot
Yep.
of people still call it the Greensboro Coliseum. It's still the Greensboro Coliseum, even
Yeah.
though it's supposedly now called First Horizons,
Right.
and that they changed the name from High Point Road to Gate City Boulevard, but I still call it High Point Road. But
Yes. Yeah. Same.
but just how you mentioned 102 had a very big, still has a very big community presence in and around the Triad, and it's a staple within the community, and especially now when you see how, like I mentioned the names earlier, that came off of 102 to be successful to where they are. And then also, too, you have several basketball players, football players from the Triad that probably grew up listening to 102, like Chris Paul, Keenan Allen, Josh Howard, and various names, so on and so forth. And then, of course, in the early 90s, Stephen A. Smith was in the triad since he played basketball at Winston-Salem State under the late Clarence Big House Gaines. And to see where he is, to where he's the big money man at
Yeah.
ESPN, and with him having triad ties. So it's, very cool to see that.
Yeah, great example of someone who I don't know. I've heard this story that he worked for the Greensboro News and Record and actually lost his job there, but he didn't let that, as a sports reporter, but didn't let that get in his way, and he kept going. And obviously, yeah, I mean, that's one of the most well-known alumni of any school in North Carolina, I would say right now. So congrats to him.
Yeah, definitely getting that big bag from ESPN. Now, you mentioned that you were there at UAG till 2011, correct?
Yes.
So when did you know that it was time to go and to move on to the next chapter, or what was that like for you making that transition out of UAG?
Well, I would say it wasn't a choice. It was I was given no other choice. Unfortunately, my position was cut due to budget cuts in 2011, which I was given heads up about a few months prior to it looking like there wasn't going to be enough money with the budget cuts that were happening. I'm pretty sure it's been so long now, but I'm pretty sure it was actually like across the board at UNC Greensboro was a 15% budget cut, and that's pretty significant. And so a lot of programs got cut. A lot of student activity programs got cut, and obviously UAG was one of the student activities that they decided, unfortunately, to cut my position. And so we initially I thought about fighting it and trying to stick around. And there was several letters written to the chancellor and the provost to keep my position, and ultimately made the decision that it wasn't worth it to pursue because I kind of handwriting was on the wall, in my opinion, that I didn't think it was going to get renewed, even with the support of former DJs, current DJs, faculty, students, staff. And so it's bittersweet, but I just my last day there was July 31st, 2011, I believe, and yeah, at that point, I actually didn't have much of a backup plan. Because I thought perhaps it was going to be something maybe last minute would come through, but anyway, I didn't have a backup plan. So then I started. I got in touch with a guy that was running a place called CFBG in Greensboro, which stood for Center for a Better Greensboro. And he was one of the many DIY type places that was putting on shows in Greensboro, on Chapman Street off of Spring Garden Street. And I think it was like November of 11. He kind of met with me and said, I'm trying to do something during the day because I have all these events at night. Because he'd also rent it out for people that would do like everything from dance classes to art classes. They would have some people would rent it for parties. And he's like, I need something during the day to kind of bring people in and just make more money for the business. And so I thought of the idea of a record store because at that time there was Gatesy Noise had just closed. Gatesy Noise was a record store that was located on. Well, I can just kind of give a little history of the record store scene when I was there in Greensboro. When I came in 99, 98, there was a place called Crunchy Music, and it was a music slash skate shop. So they were doing skateboard stuff and also CDs, records. And that was on Spring Garden Street and near campus. And then eventually Gatesy Noise opened up on Tate Street. Gatesy Noise was a very big deal too. They were also a very active record store, not just a record store, but he was off. Andrew Dudek was hosting concerts there in the store. So again, he took advantage of also the fact that Greensboro were being read off of 4085. If a band was playing at Cat's Cradle that night or leaving Chapel Hill to go down to Atlanta, he'd be like, hey, you want to stop by the record store and play? And a lot of bands did. And so anyway, he had a great little following there on Tate Street, and then went to move the record store into Flying Anvil, which was opened in 2008, and it was a very promising venue that people thought was going to be like perhaps maybe the next Cat's Cradle or the Greensboro version of the Cat's Cradle, and it did not pan out. It only lasted a few months, and he had the record store in the venue, which was cool too because you could, in between bands, you could go buy records. And anyway, he shut down and didn't reopen anywhere, and so there was a void of record stores probably from, I'm going to say, like 3 years there, 2 to 3 years. And I always thought Greensboro should always have a record store. So anyway, myself and two other guys, we actually started it. We called it a record co-op, where it was the three of us selling records, and a percentage of every record would go back to CFBG. And then eventually it kind of became a store, and it was a store from 2013, excuse me, to 2015. And so my other job I did take on though too, I should mention, I mean, kind of segueing into what I do now is I did want to continue in radio. So I did get a job at Winston-Salem State as their program director. So I was program director at Winston-Salem State's radio station, WASU, from 2013 to 2015. So I was doing the record store at night and the weekends. And then my full-time job was driving to Winston every day to be the program director at WASU. And that was an all jazz station. So it was a little different, definitely very different, actually, a different demographic, different everything about that. And just realized how much I liked doing the record store thing. So then, yeah, basically in 2015, I got the opportunity to be the manager at Carolina Soul Records, which is located in Durham, and decided to make the move from Greensboro to Durham. I lived in Greensboro for 18 years. I was kind of ready for a change. I love Greensboro, but it was just time. And this opportunity came along, and Carolina Soul is, one of the biggest online sellers, eBay in particular, sellers of records in the country, and has a huge international following. And the owner eventually had the opportunity to open a record store, and he knew I was running a store, and I'm friends with the owner. I've been friends with him for a while, and he says, basically, I'm opening a record store here. And I said, well, you need a manager. And he said, are you interested? I said, yeah. So I decided to stop CFBG and move to Durham, become the manager, and we opened Carolina Soul in December of 2015, the brick and mortar part of the store, of the business.
Okay. Okay. So with Carolina Soul, do you all sell originals, reissues? What are some of the other things that you sell in addition to vinyl?
Yeah. So yeah, we sell everything. We sell everything from the new records, new records slash reissues, to used of all genres. I mean, people hear Carolina Soul they think, oh, it's just soul records, but no, we do all genres: rock, soul, jazz, blues, reggae, gospel, rap, and country, and international. And in addition to just the new and used records, which I will say used records is about 80% of the store, 20% is new, which is a little, if you go to your average record store, a lot of it is new records these days. We like to really focus on the used stuff because I think there's a lot of great old music that just needs to be heard still to this day. And in addition to the records, yeah, we sell stereo equipment, turntables, receivers. We sell, of course, promotional material like T-shirts, slip mats, tote bags. We sell music-related books, and yeah, we ship all over the world. So we have a Discog store too, in addition to our eBay.
Cool deal. So it pretty much sounds like Carolina Soul for those of you who are too young to remember a record store or the feel of going to a record store. Look at the documentary All Things Must Pass. It's about the history of Tower Records and how record stores were the epicenter of music where you can meet like-minded people, and if you get to know somebody real good, they can look out for you, maybe stash some records aside for you when so and so comes out, and maybe get you a good deal. But now, we've seen a resurgence in the sales of vinyl with a lot of the newer acts putting out their records on vinyl so that kids now who didn't grow up with vinyl can experience what it's like to hear that hiss, that crackle of a vinyl record, even though you won't have that same warm sound as analog because it's going to be digital compressions into analog. And then also, too, I just saw recently on CBS Sunday mornings that there's been a resurgence in interest for cassette tapes. So it kind of makes me feel that the younger generation wants to be able to feel what it was like to be able to have a physical medium in their hand. But I think also what it did for us, too, I'm speaking on behalf of those of us that grew up with cassettes, with vinyl, with CD, that you had to literally sit and listen to a record because you couldn't just easily just fast forward a vinyl, or if you did fast forward a cassette tape, your tape was going to be degraded each play, each fast forward, each rewind. So it made you become a better listener to where you were able to really listen to a record and an artist because you made an investment in paying that 11.95 cassette or 18.95 for a CD for an artist that you love. So you made an investment in that.
Definitely, well, very well said. Yeah, it's that experience that I think I feel bad for somebody like Andrew Dudek, who opened, Gacy Noise was open in the era when Napster and streaming first came out, and it was like a kind of a death nail. A lot of people were thinking it was a death nail to record stores and the classic version of a record store. And the thing is, they didn't realize all along that there was always people collecting vinyl. That's always been going. It's been going on for since the '60s, and even a little bit before that. But anyway, the those that are passionate about it will always be passionate about it. And someone like myself who kind of discovered it actually in high school. Back then, when I was in high school, I was buying records very cheap. That's when they were given away in the late '90s too. I was getting great records for like I remember 25 cents. And another influence on me in Greensboro was collectibles. Was right there on Tate Street and Spring Garden. I would walk to collectibles from campus, and they had a $1.50 section. I would get $1.50 records. Anyway, yeah, and then then unfortunately the streaming came along, and everyone's like worried that it's over for record stores. And then yeah, by the time I would say 2010 rolled around, there was this resurgence happened, and people were like, I don't want to have to just not touch my media, not touch my music. I want to have something to touch that's tangible to experience it rather than just having an algorithm tell me what I want to hear. Um, and so what the industry did, which is a major reason that record stores have done well, is they decided that artists that want to do it, we're going to release your music on vinyl, and with the vinyl is going to come a download little coupon, and the consumer therefore is going to get not only that physical, but then they get the digital to do whatever they want with that download code. And that happens to this day. And then obviously other things that happen with vinyl, there's colored vinyl, there's glow in the dark vinyl, there's all these cool things you can do with it that's made it just kind of ever developing. And again, it's not a trend that's going away. It's a, in my opinion, it's a business model and a business that's going to exist. Record stores. I mean, there's two record stores. There's a Carolina Soul, and right across the street is Bull City Records in Durham, where we've been located now for 10 years. Bull City Records has been around for almost 20 years, and he moved across the street from us about 3 years ago. And now we're kind of like Record Row, where people just come. It's a one stop shop, and they can go to two record stores that have a very different vibe, selling different kinds of music. And I haven't seen any slowing down in the sale of vinyl. And if you look at the stats, and you look at, there's several documentaries about it. The vinyl resurgence, to me, it's not a resurgence anymore. It's just here to stay.
Yeah, and I agree. And also another thing too that helped with the resurgence of vinyl is record fairs. Because I remember
Yep.
when UNCG would have their record fairs, and man, you had different vendors with all of their vinyl, and some would allow you to haggle, others wouldn't, where it was all
Right, right.
sales vinyls. But for the ones that did let you haggle, you were able to get X amount of vinyl for a good deal, and that though the reissue sales of vinyl, the pricing, I don't agree with because I look at the original pricing. I'm like, you
Yeah,
mean to
yeah.
tell me I paid this for the original back in 1993, where you're now reselling that same album for two to three times what it was originally selling for? So it almost feels like you're trying to you're biting the apple twice, really taking advantage of the resurgence of vinyl sales, but also marking the price up because you know people are going to want to pay premium top tier dollar for it.
Well, a lot with vinyl is you got to always think of scarcity. And so coming back to that example of Thriller, for example, Thriller, one of the highest selling albums of all time, is still not a hard record to find. So your Thriller should never really be, unless it's a reissue, shouldn't be it should be a $20 record at tops, in my opinion. And that's what we kind of sell it at. And But going back to your 90s thing, you got to keep in mind, don't forget in the 90s, vinyl sales were diminishing dramatically and CD sales were king. And so to find a 90s vinyl is a very hard thing to find these days because a lot of people did not buy it on vinyl. They bought it, unless they were a DJ, they primarily bought it on CD or cassette. So that's why 90s vinyl can be very original copies. But I definitely agree. I mean, again, I work on the industry and I definitely agree that new vinyl prices have continued to rise. And especially after COVID, post COVID, we definitely have seen that. And it's very unfortunate. I will say there is not a lot of record pressing plants out there. I mean, they are starting to be more and more. And I think the more and more of those come out, hopefully the price will start to kind of plateau and not continue to rise because, yeah, we can't it's tough. It's tough to do that, but yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of out of as a record store person, it's out of our hands.
Mm.
That's the industry itself is getting a little greedy.
Yeah, I was curious. Have you seen the documentary on Paramount Plus, How the Music Got Free?
I have not seen that one. No.
Yeah, it's about the whole digital revolution in music, and it all started with one of the CD pressing plants out in Shelby,
Okay.
actually. So it's a really good documentary to check it
Okay.
out if you get a chance. And now, what we're also seeing too with streaming is that a lot of the artists are fighting to get their masters back and realizing like, hey, they didn't take into account this new medium to where our album is going to be put on this cloud and we're not going to see X amount of dollars for it because the rights have not been reverted back. And also with streaming, the royalty rates are not as great because how are you going to ask somebody to split a fraction of a penny? So also what we're seeing too is that artists are doing workarounds to where they're re-recording their original material so that way they can regain ownership of those recordings. So what's your take on that in the streaming and how it's affected the industry as a
Yeah. Well,
whole?
if you even just going back to the example of bands hitting the pavement and getting on the road, like the best way you can support a band is to buy their music to, for one, go pay to see them, and at the show buy their record, buy their CD. That's the way they're going to make the most money. It's not, yeah, the streaming model is definitely needs to be turned upside down because it's not beneficial for the artist like they've promoted it to be. Um, and so I definitely agree that something needs to change, but I also want to kind of push and promote people to go and support their artists by going to see them live if you can and buying the music live directly from them. Now, I also say buying it from a record store too is one of the ways they get the biggest profit. Streaming, unfortunately, is the way they get the least profit. So, if you really want to support them, if you have the ability to have a record player, have some sort of way to listen to music, physical media, go and buy a CD, go and buy a record because that's the way you're going to support them most.
Yeah, and you're gonna put money in their pocket, and they're gonna be able to share more than that fraction of a penny. They could be able to get some whole dollars off of the record. Now, before we wrap the interview up, where can people go to purchase anything from Carolina Soul as far as website and give the location to the brick and mortar in case folks want to come down to the
Sure,
Port
sure,
City
sure.
and visit?
Definitely. Yeah. So you carolinasoul.com. Yeah, we've been selling online since 2012. And right there on the website, you've got the link to our eBay store, which our eBay store changes every week. We do a different type of genre or format. So one week it could be jazz LPs, and the next week it could be soul 45s. It could be reggae 45s, gospel LPs. So anyway, we change it every week. We do take consignment. So I would say that too. If you're interested and you have valuable records that you want to consign with us, definitely reach out to us. And on the website too is our Discogs link. So that's a link to our Discogs store, which we have over 15,000 records on Discogs that you can buy directly from. We're getting, we'll ship anywhere in the world. And then, yeah, definitely if you're in the Triangle area, please come to the Durham shop located at 117 East Main Street, right there in downtown Durham. And been there for 10, going on 10 years this December, and plan to be there for as long as we can. So definitely come on by if you can, and check out the website, carolinasoul.com.
Yeah,
And the
so
social media links are on there as well.
yeah, so just go on down there, enjoy yourself. Tell them J May sent you. We ain't got no family and friends discount, but just go down there, support local, and you get to meet Jack and just really have a good time and listen to great music and find something that you'll like. And you can catch this interview wherever you stream podcasts and at YouTube, youtube.com/beyond the album cover. Any shout outs you want to give before we close?
I'd like to give a shout out to, yeah, any WAG alumni that catches this. Again, I said I was the boss, I guess, or whatever, or in charge, the general manager. But again, a lot of people felt like colleagues and a lot of close friends I made over the years through WAG. And I want to congratulate everyone that has done big things in their careers and personal lives. It's been awesome to watch that. And I would say, hopefully, we're going to have another WAG reunion. I guess I didn't bring that up, but we did have one last May in Durham that had a pretty decent turnout. And it was great to see some people that I hadn't seen in like a decade. So we're planning to do another one, I hope. And we're debating if it's going to be in Durham, Greensboro, and it might be even both because there's a lot of actually WAG alumni that live in Greensboro and the Triangle more than the Triad now. So just keep your eyes open for that. And I also want to just give props to Jay Mace for everything he's done. And it's been awesome to, again, watch what you've done with your passion for music. Cause again, that's really what comes down to the passion and it's all awesome to see.
Yeah, shout out to all the WAG alum, past and present. But before I close, I'll be remiss without saying once again, nothing that I've done wouldn't have been possible if it wasn't for you saying yes to me. All the interviews, all of everything with Beyond the album cover, you were the starting point for that. You helped make my dreams come true. Interviewing people I never thought I would interview, being a little boy in Gaston, North Carolina, watching BET, MTV, saying, one day I'm going to interview this person. I'm going to interview that person. So Beyond the album cover wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for you, Jack. And I wholeheartedly just want to tell you thank you for making my dreams come true and just helping me share my love of music and passion with people all over the world. And I thank you wholeheartedly, sir. And it was a pleasure, an honor to have you on the podcast, and I definitely hope to have you on again soon. And once again, wholeheartedly from the bottom of my heart, thank you, Jack, for taking a chance on me.
My pleasure. The feelings mutual. And again, it was a lot of the effort and time, the passion that you put in that has gotten you where you are today. And so, thank you for everything you've done for WAG and then you've done for the music scene in general.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, a very special episode of Beyond the Album Cover with the one and only Mr. Jack Bonney. Jack, thank you for coming on Beyond the Album Cover, and you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.